Is football the hardest team sport on the planet? Yes. Is Barcelona one of the most demanding jobs in that sport? Yes. Is playing on the right wing against triple markers at 18 years old in a Clásico one of the most impossible individual asks in modern football? Also yes. So then explain this. Because Lamine Yamal doesn't just play football at that level. He makes it look like it's a training drill in the backyard. Same speed the rest of the league is sprinting at, he's walking. Same angles the rest of the league is failing at, he's finding on the first touch. Same defenders that shut down Finnish superstars, he's turning inside out like they left a door open. And people keep saying the same thing. That's not fair. That's not football. How is he doing that so easy? So let's actually answer that. Not the fan cam way. The technical way. Because when a 22-year-old veteran does something in a tight space, the crowd screams world class. When Lamine does the same thing at 18, 3 times a half, the crowd stops screaming. It just watches. And that silence is the actual paradox of this video. Because football only looks easy when it's being played at a level almost nobody in history has ever reached. And that's the frame we're going to break open here. In the next 15 minutes, we're going to strip this down to the mechanics, the exact reasons why football looks slow for him and fast for everybody else. We're going to look at what elite football actually demands on a per-second basis. We're going to look at the numbers he's already put up before his brain is even fully done developing. And we're going to name the 4 specific traits that make any player in any era look like they're playing a different game than everyone else on the pitch. Because he's just talented is the laziest sentence in football media. It explains nothing. It hides everything. And by the end of this video, you're not going to say Lamine makes football look easy. You're going to say Lamine makes football look easy for one specific reason, then another, then another, then another. For reasons named, portable, ones you'll start seeing in other players the second the credits roll. But before any of that lands, we have to fix the frame. Because there's a lie about football we have to remove first. Most people don't actually know what makes this sport hard. They know what makes it entertaining. They know what makes it emotional. They can name a great goal. They can name a great save. Ask them what makes elite football technically difficult on a per-second basis, and you'll get silence or you'll get pressure. And pressure isn't wrong. It's just 8% of the answer. So that's where the next block goes. Not to Lamine yet. To the actual mechanics of why this sport eats prodigies alive before the ones who survive it get to look easy in front of a camera. Because you can't see what he's doing until you see what he's doing it against. Elite football happens inside a window most people can't picture. When Lamine receives a ball on the right touchline, from the moment it leaves the passer's boot to the moment it kisses his outside instep, the closest defender has already moved between 1.5 and 2 meters. Now count. From the touch to a decision, pass, dribble, hold, protect, the average professional has around 300 milliseconds to solve the problem. 300 milliseconds. That's shorter than a blink. Shorter than the time it takes you to react to a red light on the highway. And that's the average player. At Champions League level, that window compresses to closer to 240. Miss the window, you lose the ball. Not by a lot, by centimeters. And centimeters at that speed become goals against you. Now stack that, because the decision window isn't the only clock ticking. Right when the ball is arriving, a defender is closing at anywhere from 6 to 9 meters per second. A second-wave defender is calculating the interception line. A midfielder behind you is reading your body shape to figure out if he needs to cover. The goalkeeper across the pitch has a hand up telling the back line to squeeze. All that is happening at the same time. All that is data. All that has to be solved. And this is what makes football different from almost every other invasion sport. Basketball you can dribble in place to buy time. American football gives you a designed play with pre-assigned reads. Football gives you nothing. No timeout, no huddle, no structured pause. Just the touch, the read, the ball, and 11 brains trying to trap yours. Now add the tools you have to solve it. 2 feet, and one of them is the one you were born less good with. Some of your teammates will call for the ball into your dominant side. Some of them will call for it into your weak side. And you don't get to say no. If you can't play both, you're not elite. You're a specialist, which in football means you're replaceable. And this is why football eats prodigies. Not because they lack talent, because the room to make mistakes shrinks every year they climb. At academy level, you get half a second. At second division level, you get 400 milliseconds. At La Liga level, you get 300. At Champions League knockout level, you get 240. Prodigies who look easy at 15 suddenly look average at 18, because they didn't shave off the 60 milliseconds the level demanded of them. Those 60 milliseconds are the difference between a career on posters and a career on YouTube compilation channels titled, "What Happened To?" So when we talk about Lamine making it look easy, this is what we mean. We mean the decision window that eats normal careers is expanding, not contracting for him. He gets more time in the same physical space, against the same speed of defender, than the veterans around him. And that shouldn't be possible. Which is why the next block is the one that actually breaks the paradox open. Because you can't explain what he's doing until you look at what he's already done. The receipts, in cold numbers, at an age where the receipts shouldn't exist yet. Lamine Yamal is 18 years old. And before you use that number to soften what comes next, quick heads up, if you're finding this technical breakdown useful, hit the like button. It costs you nothing. It tells YouTube to push this to people who actually want the mechanics instead of the highlights, and it takes a second. Now back to the receipts. He debuted for Barcelona's first team at 15 years and 321 days. That number matters because the previous, youngest ever, holder at that club had gone unbroken for the better part of a century. He became the youngest scorer in La Liga history at 16 years and 87 days. He became the youngest scorer in the European Championship at 16. He became the youngest scorer in a European Championship semi-final, full stop. Not since some threshold, full stop, in the history of the tournament. And then, a month before turning 17, he became a European champion. To put that in the frame we built in the last block, Lamine won a senior international tournament before his brain finished the pruning process neuroscience calls late adolescent maturation. The organ he uses to make those 240 millisecond decisions is not even done finishing its wiring. That's the medical reality. Now stack the club side. At Barcelona, he became the youngest player in La Liga history to reach 10 goals and 10 assists in the same season. He became the youngest player ever to start a Champions League semi-final for the club. He hit 20-plus goal contributions in a season before he was legally allowed to sign his own commercial contracts without a parent in most jurisdictions. And here's the number that actually breaks the frame open. Over the last 2 full seasons combined for club and country, he has over 100 appearances, 30-plus goals, and 40-plus assists. That is a fully formed, in his prime elite winger production line. Except he's 18. Except the players putting up that dual season stat line usually did it at 24 on their third contract at their third club. He did it on his first contract at the club that raised him before his voice fully changed. And here's where the comparison gets uncomfortable. At the same age, Messi had made his La Liga debut but was still fighting for regular minutes. At the same age, Ronaldinho was at Grêmio, not near a Ballon d'Or shortlist. At the same age, Neymar was still in Brazil, not yet in Europe. At the same age, Mbappe had 1 League 1 goal. Lamine already has more elite tournament goals than Mbappe did at 18. That is not a fan take. That is a receipt. And this is where the paradox gets real. Because up until now you could tell yourself, okay, he's a hype kid, the numbers might be inflated by the era. Except the era is more physically demanding than the eras those legends came up in. Defenders are faster. Pressing is more coordinated. Video analysis by opponents is more granular. The room to look easy on this level should have shrunk, and for him, it expanded. That is what the reveal blocks are for. Because now you've seen what he did. The next question, the one nobody in the highlight reel content ever asks, is how? What is he actually doing mechanically that lets a body that isn't fully finished growing solve a problem that eats fully formed adults? And that answer starts with something most people never look at. First thing scouts started writing in their reports about Lamine at 14 was not the dribble. It was the toe. Specifically, the way he uses the outside of his right foot to receive the ball. Most young wingers, when they take the ball on the touchline, catch it with the inside of the foot because that's what youth coaches drill into them for control. It's the safe technique. It also broadcasts your next move because to go past the defender from there, you have to take a second touch to reposition the ball. That second touch is where you get tackled. Lamine skipped that step at 14. He catches the ball with the outside of his boot, in stride, and the ball lands already pointing where he wants to go. No reposition. No tell. That single technical detail buys him roughly 100 milliseconds. Remember our number from a frame block, which in the physics of elite football is an entire extra life. Now stack the second detail. His left foot. The world spent 2 years telling you Lamine cuts inside because he only uses his left. That is not what the film shows. What the film shows is a player whose weak foot is functionally the wrong enough to hold up defenders, execute wall passes, and finish clean when the geometry demands it, but who chose the left as his weapon. That's a different sentence. A specialist can't dominate. A player with a strong weak foot who chooses a preference dominates on purpose. Defenders know he wants left. Defenders overcommit to the left. And then Lamine, at 18, calmly puts the ball on his right and either passes into space or shoots. The choice is what makes it look easy, not the ability. Now the third detail. The body of protection. Watch how he receives a ball with a defender at his back. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't back into the marker. He lowers his center of gravity by a couple of centimeters, plants the non-dominant shoulder into the defender's ribcage, and turns his hips so the ball is on the far side of his body from a pressure. That is a movement you see in prime Iniesta, in prime Messi, in prime Xavi, a major stamp. But at 18, most players are still using the arm. Lamine uses the hip. The arm is what refs call. The hip is what refs don't see. That is another life bought. And then the fourth detail, which is the one that makes highlight editors reach for the slow motion button, the change of direction inside 2 meters of space. A normal winger needs a full running lane to beat a defender. 4 meters, 5 meters, 6 meters. Lamine has been beating defenders in less than 2 meters of running space, using a hip drop and a change of foot that most players can't execute at full speed. And this is where the paradox lands. Because everything I just described is not a gift. It's a stack. Toe technique, plus functional weak foot, plus body of protection, plus micro-space dribble. Any one of them, and you've got a good winger. All 4, and the pitch feels bigger for you than it feels for anyone else. And if this is the type of breakdown you actually want more of on this channel, real mechanics, not slow motion set to music, hit subscribe. We're not going anywhere, and the next reveal is about the part of Lamine that the film doesn't show, but that every teammate has been trying to explain in interviews for 2 years now. The next reveal, the one his teammates keep pointing at, is the one you actually can't teach. Frenkie de Jong said it in a mid-season interview. He said the way Lamine plays, it looks like everyone else is playing chess in real time, and Lamine is playing chess, having already seen the next 3 moves. Pedri said something simpler. He said the kid never looks rushed. Never. Not in a Clasico, not in a knockout, not in a Champions League semi in front of 80,000 people. And this is the piece the film doesn't capture. Because film shows you what he did. It doesn't show you what he saw. And that gap is where the easy feeling comes from. Now, let's translate what those teammates are describing into something concrete. In the last block, we talked about decision windows measured in milliseconds. That's the mechanical side. There's a psychological side that stacks on top of it, and it has a name in cognitive sports science. It's called anticipatory perception. It's the ability, before the ball arrives at your foot, to have already scanned the field enough times that you don't need to look after receiving. You've already decided. Elite midfielders scan the field around 4 to 6 times in the 10 seconds before receiving. World-class ones scan 8. The film available on Lamine, and there is a Barcelona sports science department that measures this, has him scanning at levels comparable to prime Iniesta. At 18, in matches where the defensive scheme is designed specifically to stop him, he's looking behind his shoulder more times per possession than most of his teammates. That is why he never looks rushed. Because he isn't. He's already decided before the ball hits him, and the decision is almost always right, because the input he made it on was almost always complete. Now, put the second layer on. Calm under pressure. There is a stat that circulated after the Euro. Lamine's completion percentage in the final third under high-press situations was higher than his completion percentage in low-press situations. Read that again. That is not how humans work. Humans get worse under pressure. His numbers get better. That is a physiological signature that shows up in a very small number of athletes in the history of measured sport. It's the same signature that shows up in prime Federer's breakpoint statistics, in prime Kobe's fourth-quarter numbers, in prime Cristiano's Champions League knockout ratios. And it is not learned. It's a stack of environment, wiring, and something you can call temperament if you want, but that word does no work. What's actually happening is his heart rate variability under pressure moves in the opposite direction from a normal athlete's. His system slows down when the stakes go up. And that's the answer to why his teammates say he never looks rushed. He isn't performing calm. He's actually calmer than the players around him. That is the invisible layer the highlight reel can't show you. The dribble looks easy because the decision was made 2 heartbeats before the touch, made under a nervous system that treated the moment as slower than it was, made after a scan that gave him more information than his marker had. Stack that on top of the 4 technical details from the last block, and the paradox from block 1 collapses. He doesn't make football look easy because football is easy. He makes it look easy because he's solving a harder problem with more tools, in more time, than anyone within 10 meters of him. And there's one more layer, and it's the one that makes all of this portable, the one that lets you spot it in other players once you know what to look for. And that's what the last block is about. Here are the 4 marks. Write them down. You'll see them in every player who ever looked like the pitch was bigger for them. Mark 1. The bought millisecond. That's a specific technical detail, a receiving toe, a first touch that removes a second one, a body angle that skips the reset step, that shaves fractions of a second off every possession. Every great player has at least one. Xavi had it in the half-turn. Iniesta had it in the pre-scan. Lamine has it in the outside of the right foot on the touchline. If a player doesn't have a bought millisecond, they can be very good, but they can't ever look easy. Mark 2. The chosen preference. A functional weak foot that lets the player broadcast a fake preference on purpose. Messi's right foot was strong enough to fake, weak enough to sell. Ronaldinho's left was strong enough to hit any pass, but his right was what he chose. Lamine's right is functional, and his left is what he chooses. A chosen preference is a weapon. A real preference is a limit. Highlight reels don't show you the difference. Film does. Mark 3. The invisible scan. Anticipatory perception. Head on a swivel before the ball arrives. The player is not deciding when he receives. He decided 2 seconds ago, and the touch is just the execution. This is the mark that separates world-class from generational. Xavi had it. Iniesta had it. Zidane had it in a way that made defenders look confused. Lamine has it at 18, and Barcelona's own department has the numbers. Mark 4. The inverted nervous system. Physiology that sharpens under pressure instead of dulling. Prime Federer had it in break points. Prime Kobe had it in the 4th. Prime Cristiano had it in Champions League knockouts. Lamine had it in a European Championship semifinal against a defender assigned to kick him out of the tournament, and his passing percentages went up. This mark is the one you can't coach. The other 3 you can train, layer, refine. This one is what it is. And Lamine has all 4. That is the answer. That is the paradox resolved. Football doesn't look easy for him because it is easy. Football looks easy for him because he stacks 4 rare marks at 18 years old, in a body that isn't finished growing, at the club that raised him, in the era that should have shrunk his margins. He shouldn't be able to do this. And the fact that he can and does is why every coach in the world is watching what happens to him in the next 4 seasons more closely than almost anything else in the sport. Because the 4 marks are the diagnosis. What players do with the diagnosis is the story. Some players stack 4 and burn out. Some stack 4 and become the argument for a generation. And that's actually where I want to leave this one with you. Because the marks are portable, you can apply them to anyone. So drop it in the comments. Which current player has 3 of the 4? Which retired legend had all 4? And who do you think Lamine is closer to at 18? Messi at 18, or someone we haven't compared him to yet? Real answers, not one word takes. If this breakdown gave you a frame you didn't have before, hit the like button. If you want the next one because there's a companion piece coming on the players who had 3 of the 4 marks and never got the 4th, hit subscribe and ring the bell. This channel isn't about compilations. This channel is about the mechanics under the compilations. Football looks easy for a reason. Now you know what to look for.